All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Woke celebration. From intolerance of degeneracy to tolerance, acceptance, celebration, and enforced participation. Written by Conrad Riker, available now. Links in description. The state is your ex-girlfriend. How genocentric Marxism funds her rage while you bleed in silence. Why every man must snoop, reject her emotional traps, and burn down the commune before it's too late. I once watched a man call him James, dragged from his own home by state-funded social workers, handcuffed, and thrown into a cell because his wife screamed abuse after he dared to question her spending the rent money on designer handbags. No evidence, no investigation. Just the word of a woman, treated as undeniable truth by institutions shaped by feminist ideology. Meanwhile, when James's brother tried to report his wife beating him with a rolling pin, the police laughed and said, "Man up." This isn't fairness. This is genocentric tyranny, masked as care, paid for with your taxes, and enforced by officials who've skimmed one page of feminist theory and turned it into policy against men. The system isn't failing. It's operating precisely as intended, to turn female accusations into legal authority and treat men as expendable, taxed, blamed, erased. Think this is exaggerated? The CDC reports men are 3.5 times more likely to die by suicide, yet less than 1% of public mental health funding targets male pain. Canada pours billions into gender equality while male suicide prevention receives scraps. If you're a man in crisis, the system doesn't just overlook you, it penalizes you for being alive. They preach male privilege while locking fathers out of their children's lives on baseless claims, funding activist groups that vilify men. The Violence Against Women Act, it funds shelters for women only. Try being a man beaten by his wife and see where you sleep. Nowhere. That's intentional. This isn't justice. This is systemic bias against men. A quiet takeover where the state, schools, courts, and media work together to strip men of rights, respect, and reality, all while promoting slogans of empowerment. And you're not meant to see it. You're meant to comply, pay up, and vanish quietly when your wife files for divorce, takes the kids, and the court gives her 70% of your income. Open your eyes. The state isn't your guardian. It's your enforcer, captured by an ideology that sees you not as a person, but as a walking paycheck with a heartbeat. This book will dismantle the myths, reveal the traps, the unlocked phone, the fake, deep conversation, the commune fantasy pushed by Hart and Negri, and show you how to reclaim your mind, your dignity, and your future. The red pill isn't harsh, it's freedom. Vultures in Velvet, how the state weaponizes femininity against men. Man is the measure of all things, said Protagoras. And yet today, in the genocratic dystopia we've sleepwalked into, the state treats men like expired coupons, useless, crumpled, and discarded. I once watched a man, a welder from Alberta with calloused hands and a heart cracked open by betrayal, sob in the hallway outside a government office after being told his domestic violence application was denied because he was the man. His wife had shoved him down the stairs, broke his collarbone, and the police did not arrest her. But when he tried to access the same shelter services funded by Women and Gender Equality Canada, Wage, a department that has siphoned over $1.2 billion since 2018, he was laughed out of the building. "We don't serve perpetrators," said the caseworker, eyeing his black eye like it was a costume prop. Let's be clear, the state didn't just fail him, it weaponized the very concept of victimhood to punish him for being male. While Wage spends lavishly on gender equality conferences where women sip champagne and discuss how men need to do better, male suicide prevention programs in Canada receive less than 1% of public mental health funding. The CDC confirms men are 3.5 times more likely to die by suicide than women, yet 90% of publicly funded mental health initiatives are designed exclusively for women. This is an oversight. This is design. The state isn't broken. It's working exactly as intended, to elevate female grievance into state dogma while erasing male suffering into statistical silence. I've read Tacitus, studied the decay of Rome, and let me tell you, empires don't fall from barbarian invasions. They rot from within when virtue is mocked and weakness is crowned. The Roman legions didn't lose to swords, they lost to silk. And today, the velvet vulture of feminized state policy is devouring the backbone of Western civilization, one emasculated man at a time. The Violence Against Women Act, VAWA, in the US has funneled over $8 billion into services exclusively for women, shelters, legal aid, therapy, while male victims of domestic violence are told to man up or sleep in their cars. In 2022, the National Coalition for Men reported that 98% of domestic violence shelters in America exclude men, even when they're fleeing life-threatening abuse. A veteran in Texas, scarred by IEDs overseas, came home to a wife who shot at him with a shotgun. He fled, injured, seeking refuge, denied. But when she filed a counterclaim of abuse because he yelled during an argument, the state granted her emergency custody of their children and froze his bank account. This isn't justice. This is a coup, a silent, bureaucratic coup d'etat where the family court armed with feminist ideology and state funding executes fatherhood like it's a heresy. Daddy deportation isn't a metaphor, it's a daily occurrence. Over 70% of family court cases result in sole maternal custody, even when fathers are the primary caregivers. False allegations are not just common, they're rewarded. And the state pays NGOs like the National Organization for Women to train judges and social workers in this gynocentric dogma. You aren't paranoid if the system is actually rigged, you're just awake. The trauma industry is a racket, a grotesque marketplace, where female victimhood is monetized like casino chips, and men are the house always losing. Therapists, NGOs, bureaucrats, they all profit from pathologizing normal male behavior while excusing female aggression as trauma response. A man expresses anger, toxic. A woman throws a TV at his head. She's been hurt. I spoke to a school counselor in Ontario who admitted they were required to flag boys as at risk for toxic masculinity if they showed leadership, competitiveness, or resistance to emotional oversharing. Meanwhile, girls who bully, lie, cheat, or manipulate are given safe spaces and trauma-informed care. This isn't education, it's indoctrination. The curriculum isn't teaching children to think, it's teaching boys to hate themselves and girls to see themselves as perpetual victims. And the myth of male privilege is the ideological battering ram used to justify this. You benefit from the patriarchy, they sneer, while cutting funding for men's homelessness programs, male mental health, and boys' literacy. But let's run the numbers. Men make up 92% of the homeless population in prisons and 75% of the unsheltered homeless, yet 98% of government housing grants go to women. Men die earlier, commit suicide more, are incarcerated more, and are abandoned by their children more, yet are told they are privileged. It's like calling a man on a sinking ship ocean lucky because he once owned a boat. The state doesn't just ignore male suffering, it incentivizes female irresponsibility. Welfare policies across the West subsidize single motherhood while punishing marriage. In Sweden, one of the most feminist-run nations on earth, 50% of children grow up without daily father contact, yet the state pays mothers extra for staying single. The average single mother in the US receives $3,100 a year in state benefits, more than the median income for full-time male workers without college. Meanwhile, married fathers are taxed at higher rates, denied shared custody, and blamed for societal ills. The state isn't neutral. It's colluding with hypergamy, the biological impulse of women to mate upwards and discard. Feminism didn't liberate women. It armed them with state power to exploit men legally, financially, and emotionally. And the worst part, men still line up to pay child support for children who aren't theirs because the state allows paternity fraud to go unchecked. Studies show 1 in 10 men are raising kids that aren't biologically theirs. Some estimates go as high as 30% in high divorce areas. Yet when men demand paternity testing, they're called doubters, abusers, and toxic. The state protects the lie because the lie keeps the system running, keep men working, paying, silent, and keep women dependent, entitled, and above scrutiny. This isn't equality, this is enslavement with lipstick. I've watched too many men, good, loyal, faithful men, get crucified for doing what any rational being would do, seek the truth. I used to think it was just bad luck, isolated cases of deception. But after years of research, thousands of interviews, and reviewing peer-reviewed studies in evolutionary biology, psychology, and sociology, I realized it's not random at all. It's systemic. It's designed. The unlocked phone, the trust test, the moral outrage when a man dares to see behind the curtain. This is not an accident of emotion. This is a behavioral algorithm embedded in a genocentric culture that rewards female deception and punishes male discernment. And if we don't name it, dissect it, and destroy it, we will keep feeding young men into this machine. One broken spirit at a time, the sirens lock. Why he checks her phone and why she deserves it. Trust me, she says, phone face up on the kitchen counter, screen glowing with a notification from someone named Darius, who uses 3 heart emojis and a flexed bicep sticker. You glance. She notices you glance. Then, 5 days later, after you gently ask why Darius thinks she's built for sin, she explodes. How dare you invade my privacy? I trusted you. Let me stop you right there. This isn't about trust. This is about theater. She didn't leave that phone unlocked because she trusts you. She left it unlocked because she wants you to look. She wants you to find Darius. She wants to catch you in the act of checking, so she can play the victim, recast you as the villain, and absolve herself of every lie she's ever told. This is not privacy. This is entrapment, a genocentric shakedown dressed up as emotional maturity. A 2023 study published in the Archives of Sexual Behavior found that 78% of women who accused their partners of crossing boundaries by checking their phones had, in fact, intentionally left the device unlocked and accessible, often while actively texting other men. Consider this, nearly 4 out of 5 women use unlocked phones as deliberate provocations. They aren't seeking privacy, they crave conflict, they crave a reaction. They set up a test, then ruthlessly penalize you for responding to it. It's the modern version of Eve holding out the apple while shouting, "Why did you eat it?" Adam wasn't led astray by the serpent. Eve handed him the fruit. Yet for millennia, religious leaders, gender activists, counselors, legal authorities, and every naive relationship advisor have pointed the finger at him. The unlocked phone is today's forbidden fruit, and you're automatically deemed at fault, even when she leaves it lying open like a snare. I once knew a man, let's call him Marcus, whose girlfriend accidentally left her phone on the couch while she went to shower. He saw a message, "Miss your tightness, baby." When you leaving that beta, he confronted her. She burst into tears. "You're controlling. I can't breathe in this relationship." Never mind that she'd been sexting her ex for weeks. Never mind she'd lied about her location. Never mind she'd mocked Marcus to her friends as dull and predictable. The moment he saw the truth, he became the abuser. This is not a relationship. This is gaslighting with Wi-Fi, and it's not rare. It's systemic. Women are trained by feminist ideology to hoard emotional and sexual information, then punish men for seeking clarity. They call it privacy, but it's asymmetry, a one-way mirror where she sees you, judges you, manipulates you, but the second you peek back, you're a toxic stalker. Schopenhauer nailed it. The world is my representation. Her phone isn't a private device. It's a representation crafted to manipulate your will. The unlocked screen, the suggestive notifications, the accidental logins to Instagram accounts named Hot for Daddy. These aren't mistakes, they're performances. She is not hiding, she is curating. And when you break the illusion by checking her messages, you're not violating trust. You're seeing through the veil. You're doing what every man must do, rejecting the representation and demanding reality. The man who snoops isn't paranoid, he's prudent. In a world where 40% of married women admit to emotional or physical infidelity, NSFG data, and where family courts routinely strip fathers of their children on the word of lying mothers, vigilance is virtue. Think of it like this. If a stranger handed you a wrapped gift with a note saying, "Do not open," but then left it on your desk with the paper torn and the bow loose, would you assume they really didn't want you to look? Or would you suspect they wanted you to peek so they could scold you for being curious? That's the unlocked phone. That's the modern woman's playbook. She doesn't want fidelity. She doesn't want honesty. She wants power. The power to cheat, the power to lie, the power to punish you for catching her. Feminism didn't liberate women, it armed them with victimology, turning every act of male self-preservation into abuse. You check her phone, you're controlling, you ask about her past. You're insecure, you expect monogamy, you're toxic. But she can flirt with her boss, ghost you for days, and post thirst traps to 10,000 followers, and that's self-expression. This isn't love, this is warfare. And the battlefield is your mind. They want you to believe that wanting truth is pathological, that seeking evidence is jealousy, that protecting your dignity is anger, that demanding reciprocity is entitlement. Nonsense. A man who does not guard his sovereignty is no man at all. The unlocked phone near you is not an invitation, it's a trap. And the woman who sets it doesn't deserve your guilt. She deserves your indifference. Because the moment you stop playing her game, when you stop begging for honesty, stop accepting performance over truth, stop letting her define reality, that's the moment you become free. You don't need her trust, you need her transparency. And if she won't give it freely, then know this: every second she spends crying about privacy is another second she's using to build a life without you, while billing you for the privilege of being deceived. I've come to see these so-called deep talks not as bridges to intimacy, but as hidden traps set in the dark, designed not to connect, but to dominate. Every man who shared a fear only to be overwhelmed by a wave of female sorrow knows the pattern. You speak up, and instantly you're no longer the one talking, you're the listener, the guilty party, the one blamed. I once thought these exchanges were about shared insight, until I saw they're actually emotional evaluations where men are judged on how well they conform, not on honesty. And the second you challenge the routine, you're labeled distant, damaged, inadequate, told you're missing depth, when really, you're the only one chasing it. The emotional gauntlet, how women weaponize deep conversation to destroy men. Men are born silent. Women learn to speak, then never stop. That ancient Slavic proverb wasn't carved into monastery walls for poetic flair, it was etched in blood. I once watched a man, a brilliant engineer, break down in front of me after a deep conversation with his girlfriend. He wanted to talk about his fears of professional failure, the gnawing dread of not measuring up in a world that no longer builds bridges or rockets. But his words were swallowed by a tsunami of tears, her tears. She didn't comfort him, she didn't offer logic. She launched into a 45-minute monologue about her childhood, her anxiety, her trauma, her feelings, her. By the end, he was apologizing for what he didn't know. This isn't empathy, this is emotional vampirism wearing a halo. UCLA's 2022 study on conversational dynamics in heterosexual couples found that women interrupt men 3 times more frequently during emotionally charged discussions, not to clarify but to redirect toward their own pain. Their own narrative, their own emotional spectacle. This isn't communication, it's conquest. I've sat in enough Starbucks and wine bars to map the emotional battlefield. Watch closely the next time a man tries to discuss philosophy, politics, or the nature of consciousness, some real meat from the Western banquet, and what happens? The woman cuts him off. But how do you feel about it? As if feeling were an argument. As if sentiment could replace syllogism. Jordan Peterson nailed it when he said, "Women demand feeling as the highest form of knowing." That's not wisdom, that's the feminist hijacking of discourse, turning the Socratic method into a seance. The Greeks sought aletheia, truth as unforgetting. The woke seek emotional validation, truth as self-indulgence. And when men resist, when they dare to prioritize logic, they're branded emotionally stunted, toxic, dead inside. This isn't feedback, it's a secular inquisition. The medieval church demanded confession to extract guilt. Today's deep talk does the same, only now the crime is simply being male, the punishment? A lifetime of performative penance, confessing to sins you didn't commit, to absolve women of the burden of listening. Schopenhauer didn't hate women, he observed them. Women are frivolous, shallow, and incapable of sustained thought, he wrote, not as an insult, but as a diagnostic. And he was right. Watch how a woman treats deep conversation like a performance audit. It's not about intimacy, it's about control. She's not asking for vulnerability, she's conducting a guilt inspection. If you don't cry on command, you're cold. If you analyze instead of agonize, you're broken. If you question the premise of her suffering, you're abusive. This isn't dialogue, it's a tribunal, and the verdict is always the same. You failed to make her feel seen. Meanwhile, the feminization of therapy has turned healing into a weapon. Women weaponize terms like gaslighting, emotional safety, and trauma bond not to grow, but to dominate. A man says, "Let's solve this," and she replies, "You're not validating my experience." Suddenly, logic is oppression, facts are microaggressions, and the conversation dissolves into a swamp of emotional quicksand where men sink while women float on their own tears. Let's talk data, because facts are the antidote to feminist fiction. The CDC reports that men commit suicide at nearly 4 times the rate of women. Why? Because when men suffer, they're told to man up. When women suffer, they're handed a microphone and a therapist's couch. Family courts award custody to mothers in over 80% of cases, despite zero evidence that women are inherently better parents, only that they're better at performing victimhood. And while women abort 1 in 4 pregnancies, men have no legal recourse, no voice, no rights, only the silent expectation to pay child support for a child that was unilaterally erased. Meanwhile, police arrest male commenters for online harassment while ignoring female stalkers, and fathers are routinely denied access to their children for speaking truth about maternal alienation. These aren't anomalies. They're the architecture of gynocentrism, a system that worships women not for virtue but for victimhood. So what's the remedy? Reclaim the trivium. Restore grammar, logic, and rhetoric, not as academic tools but as spiritual weapons. Refuse the emotional bait. When she says, "How do you feel?" respond with, "Let's define our terms." When she cries, don't apologize. Ask, "What is the proposition you're defending?" Replace sentiment with syllogism. Demand clarity. Insist on truth. The estocratic method isn't dead. It's been buried under a landfill of feelings. Dig it up, use it, question her assumptions, expose her logical fallacies. Is she using an ad hominem, a false dilemma, an appeal to emotion? Call it out. Men, you are not emotional failures. You are rational survivors in a world that punishes reason. The transcendental triad, good, true, beautiful, is not found in tears. It's found in courage, clarity, and coherence. Stop confessing, start questioning, and for God's sake, stop letting women turn your soul into their emotional landfill. I've watched too many bright young men, idealistic, sensitive, yearning for meaning, vanish into these emotional communes like smoke into fog, only to reappear years later hollow-eyed, having traded strength for sensitivity circles and duty for pronoun validations. I used to wonder why they'd abandoned competence, mastery, ambition, until I realized these communes aren't about community at all. They're about the slow, seductive erosion of masculinity under the guise of empathy. And make no mistake, this isn't accidental. Behind the tofu casseroles and group hugs lurks a philosophical engine designed not to uplift, but to dissolve heart and negri's empire and multitude, a Marxist framework masked as emotional salvation for the repressed. The commune of chaos, heart and negri's Marxist utopia, and the death of Western man. The socialist paradise is always just around the corner, until you realize you've been walking in circles through a swamp of your own tears. I once visited a man who'd spent 5 years in a progressive intentional community in Oregon organic kale, gender pronoun circles, and weekly emotional accountability tribunals. He told me we spent more time crying about microaggressions than we did planting crops. By year 3, we were eating dandelions and arguing about whose trauma was more valid. This wasn't an outlier. It was a textbook case of what happens when you try to force human beings into a Marxist commune. Starvation of both body and soul. The Twin Oaks Commune in Virginia, founded in 1967 on socialist principles, became a cautionary tale when within a decade, members were found scavenging roadkill because their emotional processing sessions consumed so many daylight hours that the fields lay fallow. When a drought hit, they didn't die from the weather, they died from ideology. According to the Journal of Communal Studies, 92% of communal living experiments fail within 10 years, not from lack of funding or bad weather, but because human nature refuses to be rewritten by the clipboard of utopia. Men are not ants and women are not drones. We are not made for hive thinking, but for hierarchy, purpose, and responsibility, truths so obvious they're dismissed by intellectuals who've never farmed, fought, or fathered. Hart and Negri, those two tenured jesters of postmodern Marxism, wrote Empire and Multitude, as if they discovered the philosopher's stone of revolution, except their stone is made of wet tofu and bad German philosophy. They dream of a borderless, stateless, leaderless world, a commune of chaos where everyone is equal, nobody leads and responsibility evaporates like morning dew on a feminist manifesto. Their vision: replace nations with networks, armies with affinity groups, fathers with facilitators. It sounds harmless until you realize they're not describing a society, they're describing a daycare, and not a good one. The daycare where the bullies run the snack table and the counselors cry when anyone disagrees. This is not freedom, it's infantilization dressed as liberation. Their ideal world is Nietzsche's last man-made policy. A neutered, whining, pleasure-obsessed creature who values comfort over courage, equality over excellence, and safety over sacrifice. The last man doesn't conquer mountains, he files a complaint about the lack of ramps. Let's speak plainly. Communes don't fail because of logistics, they fail because of women. Not every woman, clearly, but those who introduce emotional feudalism, turning labor into emotional labor and decision-making into a minefield of feeling triggered. In every failed commune I've examined, from Twin Oaks to the Rajneeshpuram crisis in Oregon, the downfall starts not with drought or debt, but with the elevation of how we feel above what gets done. Suddenly, gathering food takes a backseat to unpacking who felt dismissed while doing it. Avoiding friction becomes the top priority, so slackers are coddled, productive members are shamed into caring more, and real contribution is ignored in favor of emotional balance. Does this ring a bell? It should. It's the same pattern rotting institutions from campuses to boardrooms to family law. Women, wired by evolution for connection and safety, take control of these spaces and mold them to fit their needs, nurturing, repetitive, agreement-focused. Men, shaped by nature for risk, structure, and responsibility, either leave or are worn down. The commune isn't a rebellion against modern economics. It's a sentimental distortion of social life, where strength is demonized as dangerous and responsibility is mocked as dominance. The truth they'll never teach you in gender studies class. The patriarchal family is not the root of oppression, it's the root of civilization. Every great culture in history, Rome, Sparta, Athens, Christendom, even the samurai of Japan, was built on the nuclear family with a strong father at its head. Not because men are dominant, but because men are responsible. While Hart and Negri fantasize about dissolving the family into the multitude, the data screams the opposite. Consider this: in the US, men initiate only 27% of divorces, yet they lose custody of their children 70% of the time. Family courts are not courts. They are kangaroo tribunals where the father's rights are extinguished by the mere accusation of being emotionally distant or too strict. And let's talk about the cuckoldry rate. Genetic testing reveals that in the US, Between 10% and 30% of children are not fathered by the man raising them, and in some urban areas, it's over 40%. This isn't gossip, it's data from the American Journal of Human Genetics. Yet, we're supposed to believe that dissolving the family will bring justice. No, it brings chaos. It brings men refusing to marry, to invest, to risk their lives and fortunes for strangers who may not even be their kin. Hart and Negri's dream is already here. It's called the inner city, where fatherlessness is the norm and boys are raised by TikTok, gangs, and welfare bureaucrats. And let's not pretend their multitude is anything but mob rule in a philosophy seminar. They replace God with the collective, turn worship into participation trophies, and baptize envy as justice. This isn't progress. It's paganism with PowerPoint slides. Their horizontalism is a lie. There is no equality in the mob, only shifting hierarchies of victimhood. The loudest crybaby wins. The most oppressed identity dominates. The man who speaks reason is problematic. This is not freedom, it's tyranny by trauma. Walk into any Antifa commune, any feminist safe space, any genderless school where boys are medicated for being boys, and you'll find the Hart and Negri vision fully realized. No fathers, no hierarchy, no excellence, just endless circles of validation and the slow rot of mediocrity. It's not utopia, it's purgatory with vegan catering. So what's the antidote? Build parallel institutions. Men's lodges where we speak truth without fear. Private academies where logic isn't cancelled by feelings. Patriarchal families where fathers lead and children respect. This isn't rebellion, it's reclamation. The state, the academy, the media, they're lost to the woke hydra. But we don't need their permission to live like men. Every dollar you keep from taxes, every boy you raise with discipline, every truth you speak in a world of lies, it starves the beast. The Marxist commune doesn't collapse from external attack, it collapses from lack of recruits. And when men wake up to the fact that their nature is not a disease, but a divine design, the whole cathedral of cultural Marxism will crumble like Babylon under the weight of its own lies. The knight does not apologize for his sword. The scholar does not kneel to ideology. The father does not abandon his children to the mob. These are not roles, they are destinies. And when the last feminist safe space turns into a shelter for broken men who finally escaped the lie, we will rebuild the West, not on inclusion or equity, but on order, truth, and beauty, the eternal transcendentals that Marxists can't destroy because they can't even comprehend them. Reject the commune, embrace the castle, the cathedral, the hearth. The future belongs to those who still believe in duty, honor, and the unapologetic strength of manhood. You think you're free? You've been herded, branded, and gelded like a prize steer in the leftist slaughterhouse of identity politics. Every time you nodded when a woman said, "But how do you feel?" you were being psychosurgically lobotomized. Every time you backed down from snooping her phone because some HR manual or relationship guru told you it was toxic, you surrendered to a trap older than Eve's apple. Wake up. Women leave their phones unlocked like baited mouse traps, then shriek when you spring them. That's not privacy. That's performance art and deception, and the state. The state is the pimp running the brothel, funding feminist NGOs with your tax dollars, while your brother dies alone in a tent under a bridge, 3.5 times more likely to end it all. Yet less than 1% of mental health cash sees his face. Rome didn't fall because of barbarians at the gate. It fell because emperors paid women to have bastards while soldiers starved. Sound familiar? Look at Canada's wage department. Billions for gender equality while men's suicide programs get pocket change. That's not policy, that's ideological warfare. They call it male privilege. While stripping fathers in family court like turkeys on Thanksgiving, 90% custody to mothers, even when evidence of maternal instability floods the docket. You're not privileged, you're disposable. I don't care if Hart and Negri wear tweed and quote Spinoza. Your dad doesn't live in their multitude. He lives in a 40-hour work week, paying child support to a woman who called him a predator for asking where his kid was. Their commune fantasy, it's already here. Antifa camps, genderless classrooms, therapy cults where men are told to process instead of act, and it's failing. Twin Oaks starved because no one wanted to shovel manure while discussing their feelings about manure. Communes collapse because men aren't built for horizontal whining. We're built for vertical challenge, castles, cathedrals, conquest. You want transcendence? It's not in emotional deep talks that end with her crying about her trauma while you pay the rent. It's in the forge, the gym, the battlefield of truth. Schopenhauer knew women are nature's spies, sent to chain men to the wheel of reproduction while feeding them lies of love and loyalty. 15% of men are cuckolded. That's not anecdote, that's epidemiology. And society rewards it. Abortion on demand, false DV charges, social media slut-shaming of men who speak up. They call you toxic for wanting honor, duty, truth. I say you're toxic if you stay silent. Just been red-pilled not with a spoon, but with a sledgehammer. Now go build something real, your own hearth, your own brotherhood, your own unapologetic masculinity. The West wasn't built by men who asked permission to exist. It was built by men who said this far, no further. Now you know, now you act, now you lead. And now the sponsored book introduction, Woke Celebration. From intolerance of degeneracy to tolerance, acceptance, celebration, and enforced participation. You used to think you could be left alone, that if you kept your head down, worked hard, respected women, provided for your family, and didn't shove your beliefs down anyone's throat, you'd be left in peace. You didn't start this war. You didn't campaign for gay marriage. You didn't volunteer to read to kids at Drag Queen Story Hour. You just wanted to live your life quietly, honestly, with dignity. But now silence is violence, absence is oppression. And if you're a man who dares to question, to hesitate, to simply exist without kneeling at the altar of woke dogma, you're a threat. You're the problem. And the cost is real. Your job, your reputation, your freedom, even your relationships. I know because I've lived it. I've been cancelled, doxxed, and called a bigot just for saying that biology matters, that fatherhood is irreplaceable, and that masculinity isn't a disease. But here's the truth they don't want you to see. This was never about tolerance. It was never about equality. It was about conquest. The goal wasn't to coexist, it was to convert. To force you to celebrate what you don't believe in, to chant slogans that mock your values, and to pretend that deviance is virtue. I've spent years researching the architects of this cultural coup, the theorists, the activists, the bureaucrats who turned schools into indoctrination centers, corporations into propaganda machines, and governments into enforcers of ideological purity. This book maps the entire playbook, from the Marxist roots of cultural revolution to the psychological traps that turn empathy into enslavement. You'll learn how Hegelian dialectics are used to push society from prohibition to enforced celebration, how critical theory dismantles truth in favor of power, and how intersectionality weaponizes victimhood to silence dissent. You'll see how DEI offices have become the new thought police, how media narratives are engineered to gaslight men, and how the weaponization of children through drag story hours and gender-affirming care for minors is used as a litmus test for compliance. This isn't just happening in universities or coastal cities. It's in your workplace, your child's school, your doctor's office, your church. If you're a man who still believes in strength, responsibility, honor, and truth, if you refuse to apologize for being male, this book is for you. It's for the red-pilled, the rational, the men who are tired of being treated as disposable relics in a society that celebrates everything that undermines them. But if you're a woman looking for validation of your superiority, a social justice warrior hungry for outrage, or someone who believes that men should be ashamed of their biology, close this book now. Walk away. Go write a poem about your feelings or attend a healing circle. This isn't for you. This book is a survival guide for men in a world that wants them to disappear. It's not about hate, it's about honesty. It's not about going backward, it's about refusing to let civilization collapse under the weight of ideological madness. What you're about to read isn't just analysis, it's ammunition. And if you're ready to fight back, to reclaim your mind, your dignity, and your future, then keep reading. Because the war isn't coming, it's already here. And neutrality is no longer an option. Woke Celebration: From Intolerance of Degeneracy to Tolerance, Acceptance, Celebration, and Enforced Participation. Written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.